views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. We have a special show for you tonight. We will be doing something that we've only done once before, and that one time was literally 20 years ago. Tonight, we have a studio audience, and it's a very special studio audience made up of students from Truman High School in Co-op City. And what they'll be watching and participating in will be tonight's show with Councilman Andy King. And full disclosure, I am teaching these students in a speech and communications class at Truman High School. It's part of the dual enrollment program at Monroe College. And for the past several weeks, we've been reviewing what questions should be asked, and the students themselves will ask the councilman questions that they and their classmates have selected. Now, we will not be taking phone calls tonight. The program is being pre-recorded. But if you have additional questions or comments or something to say about the show, you can send them in an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. So we say welcome to the students from Truman High School. We have a couple of students who are in the Monroe College Empowerment Institute joining us as well. And for now, we say hi to our longtime participant in Bronx Talk, Councilmember Andy King from the 12th Council District. Nice to see you, sir.
Same here. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, and I saw that you're wearing green in honor of the Mustangs of Truman High School.
Oh, yeah. They had a dynamic academic year, as they have over the past couple of years, but the athletics teams have done very well. The football team winning a championship, the girls basketball team representing, and the boys basketball team. So kudos to Truman.
Could there be a more excited, more enthusiastic supporter of young people than the councilman? And we were talking before the show about your interest in not only seeing them do well, but engaging them in the political process and in also really in the public service process. So let's start there before we turn to the students and have them talk to us.
Well, I was always taught, and young people always hear me say that people pay attention to people who participate. And I always urge young people, whether it's your glee club or whether it is a student government or whether it's an after-school program or more importantly, even just your neighborhood and the community that you live in, that you engage in the process. Adults make decisions on your quality of life, so you should be part of that process as well. So on the 20th of April, we're hosting the annual Bronx Youth Empowerment Program's Youth Speak with the Chancellor Carmen Farina, Jeff Tweedy, who is the president of Sean John, and everyone got a little Sean John gear in their closet, as well as Speaker Carl Hasty. So we're looking forward to that day. But more importantly, as we roll into participation, I always urge, especially our young brothers and sisters from Truman who are all seniors, I know you've all registered to vote. I'm saying take this opportunity to be a part of the voting process because your vote counts. You want your voices to be heard. You want people to respect you, but you got to be engaged. Again, it goes back to people pay attention to people who participate.
On last week's show, I had a conversation with the controller of the city of New York, Scott Stringer, who just issued a report about voting and access to voting. Your new council member and associate in the council, Rafael Salamanca, who was just elected, was elected in an election that only had 3% of eligible voters coming out to vote. That's a horrible sign, and I'm assuming that's the kind of thing you want to address. It's what the controller also wanted to address.
Yeah, and we need our young people to understand that it's their generation's time now to get active. I always go back to the bus boycott in 1954, where young people would tolerate, who who were not tolerating the injustices that were happening, who were fed up, and said, how do we make a change? So they stopped riding the bus. And I keep reminding young people that Dr. King was only 26 when they asked him to lead this movement. So it wasn't like 50 or 60-year-old was taking charge. It was teenagers that were making the call and doing the work.
Before we turn to the students, I'll add one little anecdote which we shared with them. My first vote was way back when for George McGovern. We were talking about that. But the whole movement to change the vote from 21-year-olds to 18-year-olds was because young people had stood up and said, you know what, if we're going to go to war, we don't want to not have the opportunity to be able to say who might or might not send us, and that's why we change things. So there's the message to our young people that, that they got to come out and vote.
Participate. You've signed
and
up,
also
register.
participate in your youth program, which is really an extraordinary thing.
Yes.
All right, so now hello to my students at Truman High School. The first question is going to be asked by Kyrique Milton. Nice to see you, Kyrique. Thanks for joining us.
How are you doing, Councilman King?
Doing well, Brother Kyrique. How are you?
All right. How are you? So as citizens of the Bronx, it should be fairly obvious that, we care about our surroundings and our interest in where we live in. But I was wondering how you, our councilman, viewed the Bronx opposed to all the other boroughs here in New York.
How's the Bronx doing compared to your colleagues in government?
Well, the first thing I would say, the Boogie Down Bronx is strong and growing. I'm going to say this publicly. I don't want to be called an outer borough because the Bronx is part of the 5 boroughs of the city of New York, and we should be addressed as a borough in the city of New York. So as comparison to other boroughs, I think that we're doing pretty good. Yes, we've had some challenges with unemployment and housing, but there's been an infusion of cash, and as we see, people paying attention to the Bronx to figure out how do we uplift the Bronx. I mean, it's giving young people like yourself an opportunity to better programs, better housing, your parents or people who are involved in you, better wages, which we've just signed in, the Governor Cuomo just signed in this budget, the $15 an hour. So that's a good start to getting people on economic freedom. So I think the Bronx is doing quite well between the development that's happening all around the Bronx, and specifically the 12th District. We've done a lot of new development and we have more development on the table.
Do you, Kyrique, let me just interject a follow-up there. We are 62 in healthcare, and the borough president has the Not 62 program. Some of the other indicators, our unemployment numbers are doing better. When you look at your colleagues in government in Brooklyn or Queens, outer boroughs, do you say, gee, I wish we had what they have, or are we getting our fair share?
I'm going to say I don't believe we're totally getting our fair share. But I will say this to your question, especially when it comes to health and hashtag Not62. That's everyone they have to change their mindset of how are they going to behave. The foods you're going to eat, the activities that you're going to engage in that keep you healthy. Now, yes, the Bronx has a number of food deserts, and we don't have the quality, as I would say, grocery stores and fresh produce that I've seen in other boroughs and parts of the city, but we're having the conversation to change that. But I say again, when you participate and you demand that you get treated a certain way, people will listen. So if you're tired of, open up bodegas on every corner as opposed to giving me a quality produce station or quality meats in my neighborhood, if you're advocating for that change, it will happen. But if no one says anything about it and you continue to eat Dorito chips and 50-cent sodas, that's what they'll give you.
Well, maybe the advocacy starts here on Bronx Talk. Next question goes to Tyreek Dixon. Hi, Tyreek.
Hi, how are you? Hi, my question to you is how can we develop role models in our community?
How can we develop role models?
This cuts right to, I know that the councilman's very passionate about it. Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. When it comes to role models, the first thing you have to do is respect people. And I always say lack of funding doesn't mean lack of service. So many people believe that in order to give of themselves, they have to get paid. But I will say this to you. Your number one role model, God willing, should be the person in your house who's providing for you. You shouldn't be looking at the television to find that role model. And if you can't find that role model in the house, then that's the only time I would say you look out of the house, but then you better look at somebody who has a commitment to helping people, not somebody who has a commitment to putting money in their pocket. So that means maybe finding that guidance counselor or that speech teacher or that science teacher or that phys ed teacher or your math teacher, someone who's already made a commitment to helping children. And that's when you start looking at role models. Please don't look at the millionaire or billionaire because good money doesn't make you a quality person. It just makes you a rich person.
I'm going to also interject. We have the two students from Monroe College's Empowerment Institute. If we do have time, we'll have them ask a couple of questions. They have learned this idea of, each one teach one, no man left behind, that kind of thing. And so they're going to step up, and if we do have time, we'll hear from them as well.
That, yes.
All right. Did you have a follow-up, Kyrie? All right. Antonia Burt is going to ask the next question.
Hello. Curriculums in New York State schools are totally based off of getting students college ready or and test taking. How can this be changed for students that want to go into the other path? So let me make sure I
understand your question. You're saying the curriculum in high school today is based on preparing children for college and
test taking.
And test taking.
How can this be changed for students who may want to go in a different path?
Okay, I would have to ask you, what path would you want to take that will say that the curriculum that's off? Now, I will agree with you that there is something wrong with high school education. There's something wrong with the Department of Education when our children are graduating from high school and still when they go to college, they have to take remedial classes. So something is still wrong there on the standards and the level of education that we have in the city of New York. We spend a lot of money in it. So where are we in comparison to the rest of the country? When we've gotten better because President Obama has put a lot of energy. Carmen Farina has figured out how do we look at schools and say some of our adults in the school buildings aren't delivering on what our kids need. So if you don't have a quality teacher in the classroom, then you're not going to teach quality stuff. Then our kids won't be filled with quality information that they can go out and recite, regurgitate, and be able to pass a test, but let alone expand your mind that you can learn. I agree that there is a problem when you teach kids to the test because we should be teaching you to understand, not just remember, because you can remember something for 7 minutes. But on the 8th minute, you're in trouble if you forget the second step to get to that final algebra question. So you have to be able to have the concept of learning, understanding. And when you understand, you can spit it out anyway because it's part of your whole foundation because now you got full understanding. Changing the whole education system requires you all to say this is unacceptable. It comes a point that advocacy starts where you are. And if you're at a place that you're dissatisfied, then you have to say, hey, you need to raise the standards for me. I cannot accept these standards. I take it from education to music lyrics. If you continue to accept lyrics that they put out in the world that destroys you, and you keep putting your money into it, then you get what you will get, the self-destruction. So you have to figure out if advocating to those adults who are shortchanging you in your education process. I hope yes.
I want to follow up a question, Antonia. Of course, the class knows that we've developed this question in class. I'm curious, do you find that the test taking is a little oppressive, that you find you're not learning maybe as much as you can because you're spending so much time being concerned about the tests?
I feel that students, like I said, that may want to go in a different path than like go into college or maybe want to go to trade school or other areas, they're being left behind than the students that actually want to go to college and further their degree, go to get their master's and doctorate and so on.
That's an interesting question. The idea of trade schools. Now, this has come up in the council and elsewhere.
Right.
You want to address that?
Well, I am an advocate of learning and educating. And I've always said education doesn't always mean that you got a PhD or an AA or a BA, but education requires not what you just only do in the day school, but what you do out of a day school. And not everyone is going to be a doctor. So what do you do to become a quality person? So if you are working in technology or you're working in the arts or you're just working with your hands, because see what had happened with NAFTA, a lot of our hand jobs left the country. So we have a lot of people skilled with using their hands, but today's market is all about the brain, technology, and how do you be in this green world without figuring out how do you take your skill as knowing how to sew and be profitable in that. If I'm a great cook, how do I able to do that? If I'm a great painter, how do I do that? If I'm a great builder, how do I do that? And having access to that type of curriculum that will allow you to get into that field. And then once you get to that level of you're qualified to get into that field, access to get into that field, because in some of those fields, it's locked up too. It's almost like a good old boys network if you don't have if you haven't been exposed in the networking world to know who. Gary and I would know it's not about what you know sometimes. It's who you know.
I know him. He knows.
Yeah, so
No, that certainly is part of it. And, you know, the whole idea of a practical education is a very important one. There are many people, some of the students in the class talked about, you know, they may want to get into auto mechanics and those kinds of things. I would put forward that the combination of academic work in the classroom with that kind of a skill is a vital thing, because as we both know, you can never lose your education. Once you have it, you always have it.
So true.
Antonia, thank you very much. Anthony Green has a question for us. Anthony, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Councilman King?
I'm well, Brother Green.
My question for you is, what is the priority of the police? Because oftentimes it seems that their only priority is to harass other young people.
Priority of the police, sir.
Well, I will say this to you. I am not NYPD, so I cannot tell you what the priorities of the police officers are. I've had a number of conversations. I've sat down with NYPD. Their goal is supposed to be able to protect and serve the residents of New York City. We do know there have been some challenges when it comes to relationships, and I think that's where you're pretty much coming from. Your question is stemming on some of the ill relationships that communities of color have experienced with NYPD. At the end of the day, they still have a responsibility and a job to deliver and protect you, whether you black, brown, green, purple, whatever. That's their responsibility. And if they fail at that responsibility, I will give Commissioner Bratton credit right now, and I think it is all because of pressure that he has been receiving from the communities in New York City about the unfairness and injustice of how people have been treated in the city of New York. So for instance, when you get a mailman who is accosted by 4 police officers because of, you know, we had a little street mishap, but you don't get out of your patrol car and all of a sudden and disrespect the public community servant who's delivering the mail, and to the point that you arrest them. That's just bad policing, but more importantly, it's bad people relationships. Again, I always say to us, as much as we all love this great country of America, I don't want anyone to ever get confused. We will build on a racial divide. Does that racial divide still exist? It does exist. And once we get to a point that we acknowledge it, then we can still continue to have real conversations of how to deal with it. Because there's no reason, I guarantee you, if, no offense, Gary, if that postman looked like Gary, there wouldn't have been nothing. Just keeping it real.
I get it.
Just keeping it real. So this is where...
no offense taken, I assure you.
But Commissioner Bratton is realizing that there's a challenge and a problem. And what he did, he stripped them. He stripped them, and they were held accountable. Now they're going through another phase of being held accountable for their behavior. So I'm glad that officers will make mistakes, students will make mistakes, council members will make mistakes. But at the end of the day, if you're doing the right thing, everything will be all right. But if you're not, you have to be held accountable. And I think that's what's happening.
I'd like to follow that up. Rather famously, Commissioner Bratton eliminated the old-fashioned idea of stop and frisk. Yet this question came up in the class that students were saying, you know what, we're still getting harassed. Do you believe that, for want of a better term, the trickle down of the idea is working, that police officers get the idea that we've backed off some of the tactics that were used over the last administration?
Well, that's a deep question, and I'm going to try to answer it in about a minute. And I'm going to go real deep. I have a piece of legislation right now that we're going to have a hearing on, and it's called a 3/5 clause awareness. And what it does, it is asking Congress to make an amendment to the United States Constitution that the 3/5 clause, which was created back in the 1700s because Congress was trying to figure out representation from the North and South. Slavery was legal in the South, so they wanted to to get more counts from slaves. The agreement was to compromise that the slave, the African American, will be considered 3/5 of a human being. I'm asking the Congress right now, because there's no language in the Constitution that negates that the African American is considered a 100% whole. It's still 3/5 of a person. And I believe it's that mentality from day one in the foundation of this country that you still get blacks who get, because there's no other ethnicity that gets treated like that. So when you get an officer today who is not of African American descent or black, then they get treated differently than the rest of society. So when you say, even though we remove stop, question, and frisk off the book as it was known, if officers still have the same mentality when they come into a community of color, they're going to still behave in such a manner.
Two quick follow-up questions. Is it a matter of training? NYPD needs to do more training, or your suggestion is it really needs to come from the top down?
Training can help, but I will say this, and young people, I want you to understand, Gary, I want you to understand, you're not going to turn a bigot into someone who all of a sudden loves everybody because you put a shield and a blue uniform on them. You have to assess who the stability of the person that you're bringing in to be an NYPD officer. And if your background doesn't make you sensitive to other cultures, maybe this is just not the job for you.
There are those in law enforcement and in criminology who say that by backing off stop and frisk the way we did it, that's what's contributing to crime. Do you buy that was a strategically bad thing to do for the crime rates in the city of New York?
No, not because when they were having stop, question, and frisk, over 90% of the stops yielded nothing. So that means it was 10% of the people that you harassed, but 90% of the people who were law-abiding citizens, you had no records, had nothing. So what you did was created records for people or put people to undue stress. So I just think when it comes to the sky is falling mentality, every time we change something that NYPD doesn't like, then you try to attach something else to it to see, I told you so. And it's not really accurate, it's not true.
Next question comes to us from Sheldon Davis. Sheldon.
How you doing, Councilman? My first question is that how do we improve the environment in the Bronx and the Bronx overall?
How will we improve the environment in the Bronx?
Yes.
Well, it's your time to improve the environment. That means that you need to learn as much as you can about the environment, like you learn about that new song that just came out last week by Ciara or about Beyonce. That means what? You need to make sure that if you need to find where you recycle, then recycle. That means if there are bad foods out there, don't engage in bad foods. That means if you need to commute a community garden and be part of a community garden, then be a community garden. That means if there's dirt on the ground, on the 12th of every month, I do what I call Operation Cleaner Streets, where I pull youth and community presidents together and we tackle a part of the district and we clean it up. Whether we plant something or just get all the cans out or get all the bottles up or the cigarette butts or just all the feces, just clean up the neighborhood. You have to take responsibility in your neighborhood. And that means when you're walking past something that's dirty, pick it up, and be a part of keeping your environment clean. And I end with this. Everybody's talking about going green. You need to understand what going green actually means and the technology behind it so you can recycle your organics, but let alone be a part of the jobs that are going to be coming in technology when it comes to creating greener spaces in the borough of the Bronx.
If I can just interject a follow-up, part of the dialogue we had when we came up with that question, a lot of the students were concerned about the literal cleanliness in the streets, that they say, you know what, in Co-op City and other places we go, it's disgusting. It's dirty.
Right.
Your thoughts?
My thoughts on
is
that
is it a sanitation department problem?
Sanitation has a responsibility to provide a certain level of maintenance to keeping communities clean. When you have a real challenge of dirty areas, then yes, you should call your agencies. You call my office, and we find out where the problem is, and we get on if someone's missing a cleanup route. Because some areas are in black spots in the neighborhood. Then again, it goes back to we live in our neighborhood. We have a responsibility to throw the trash in the trash receptacles, not on the ground. How many of you have walked, don't answer the question, how many of you have walked around, had that bag of chips and couldn't wait to put it in the trash bag? You just dropped it on the street or put your bottle on the curb and kept moving, or had some gum or some now latest, whatever you're eating, what candy, sour patch, or whatever you're eating, and decided that instead of putting it in my pocket until I get to a place where it's trash, I drop it. If New Yorkers decided themselves or Bronxites decided themselves, I want to keep my neighborhood clean, because if you keep the streets clean like you keep your bedroom clean, and I'm saying that you keep your bedroom clean, then
you may be making an assumption there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's what it all boils down to. It's up to us. It's not like any of the trash on the streets of New York is being imported in from Mars. Human beings are littering the streets of New York. So people have to have a paradigm shift of how they view their community if you want it environmentally clean.
Thank you very much. Lisa Dane has the next question. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Hello, Mr. King. Co-op City is a beautiful place to live.
Yes, it is.
And majority of Truman students live in Co-op City. We need more variety of stores and but the stores are expensive. How can we make Co-op City more affordable?
You want to how
Good
we can,
question.
as far as retail and stores and well,
I mean, Bay Plaza has a lot of stores, but it did come up in our dialogue that students were like, you know what, a lot of the stores are too expensive, and we still want to see more stuff.
Well, we just opened up the largest mall in the city of New York. That's Bay Plaza. If you didn't know, it's the largest indoor mall in New York. Does it cost money to run a mall? Yes, it does cost money to run a mall. Now, I frequently go into the mall and look around and shop where I can shop. Yeah, you're going to have to be a little frugal. And I will say this to you, if you think things cost too much, then that's when you advocate again to owners of places to let them know that if you need us to patronize your stores, that you have to have better deals for us to shop here at your locations. I also say to you this, remember what you asked for, because 99 cents gets you 99 cents. You follow what I'm saying? 99 cents gets you 99 cents. So everything is not always about the dollar, because if you want to shop and get yourself a nice blouse or it doesn't mean that you have to pay $300 for it makes it any better than the $5 blouse. But somewhere in between is what you make it. It's what you wear, it's how you wear it, not the cost of what you wear. So when you're talking about if it's too expensive, then that's when we start talking to the owners of our malls, owners to our stores, to find out how do we cut costs. I'm a teen and I want to buy, but everything in here is over $75. And we don't, as a 14-year-old, I can't spend, my mom will kill me if I come in with a $75 blouse I come home with. How do you have deals for the high school student? And then maybe they start figuring out strategically how they come up with good deals on any given day for you all to come in and do some shopping. They will love to keep you as a consumer.
Councilman, we're just about at the end of the show. I know you joined me in thanking the students from Truman High School and also the couple of students who came from Monroe College and our Empowerment Institute. I'll give you 15 seconds, just a final message of what your thoughts are from what you heard today.
I am so proud of each and every one of you. I'm going to ask you to continue to keep showing up wherever that is. Do not let anybody steal your joy. Remember, people pay attention to people who participate, and the world only gets better if you make it better. Is anybody a loser here? No. You're all winners, right?
You're all Truman Mustangs. Come
all right.
on, man.
So remember this.
Right.
Winners never quit, and quitters never win.
Council member, thank you so much, and thanks again to, you can applaud, they're all applauding there, there you go. Folks, of course, as always, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you can email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can put them on our Facebook page, and we read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Next week, you'll be happy to know, I'm happy to know, it's going to be baseball. The opening of the season is always exciting to us here in the Bronx, and we will be presenting a new baseball book written by a Bronxite. The book is about Kiner's Corner. Bronx sportscaster, baseball expert, and author Howie Carpin will be our guest. So we'll have a lot of fun at that time. Again, thanks to the council member, thanks to Truman High School and Monroe College, and we'll see you next week.